This video is a bit of a departure for me, but rather than showing some DCS gameplay, I want to do an unboxing of a new accessory I've got for my sim pit. So this is a Forge UFC that's a replica from the A-10C cockpit. This is available on Etsy and it's pretty reasonably priced, to be honest. It's under £100. Shipping from the US did cost me another £30, but I bought this at Christmas and the seller was offering 15% off. So all in all, it cost me just under £110. For 35 buttons, that's a pretty good price for a button box of anyone's money. Initial impressions are that it's very solid, but it is fairly 3D printed. The button presses are pretty clear. You can definitely feel when you press the button down. A slight disappointment that the rocker switches are flat. There is no angle to them as there is in the A10 in real life. So if you're going to be planning on using this in VR, you might need to make some personal modification so you can position your fingers on those buttons clearly without confusion. The buttons look 3D printed and there's a little bit of lack of clarity on some of the text on the buttons themselves. I don't think that'll be an issue for gameplay, but for just overall quality, it's not quite 100%. The box itself is solid. Looks like there's a combination of materials here. Aluminium front panel by the looks of it. And one really nice little touch is the screws are in exactly the same place as they are on the A10. Looking at the back of the unit, my first major impression is that there is nowhere to mount it other than integrated dovetail slots that the supplied legs slide into. It would be really nice, I think, if there were a couple of screw holes on here with captive nuts in so that it could be more easily mounted into sim pits. But maybe that's a feature that will appear in later versions of this. And the other issue that might be a problem for some people is the USB cable comes directly out the back, and again that might cause an issue for mounting. Once on the legs, the unit sits canted back at a slight angle, but the legs themselves don't have any grippiness to them, so if you mount this on a desktop and try and push it, it is just going to slide away from you. There's a nice big master caution light, and this unit is integrated with DCS BIOS, so it's intended that when this is connected to DCS, when the master caution light flashes in the cockpit, it should flash on this button box too. Withdrawing to my sim pit now and just having a quick look at the setup I've got currently. I do have the Thrustmaster MFDs and a button box in front of me, and my keyboard is mounted directly in the center. I'm going to have to rearrange this layout a little bit to be able to get the UFC in front of me and probably move the keyboard off to my right hand side. Looking at a rough layout with the keyboard removed, comparing it to the position in the A10, it is in the game shown sitting a few inches above the top of the MFDs, so if I want to replicate that, I'm going to need to lift it up a little bit and mount it around about there. Okay, so I've just got myself plugged in. It's still not mounted properly yet, and I want to have a check on the controls in DCS. I've identified it in the list of controllers and renamed it to make it a bit clearer for me in future to tell which buttons I'm mapping. One thing that's really helpful from the manufacturers is they've supplied a DCS profile that's already populated. So I've downloaded that from their website, navigate to it in my downloads, and just load that profile directly into my game. So now, when I click the buttons, everything is already mapped and ready to go. And one thing I notice is that in DCS, 4 of the buttons on the UFC are not actually mapped to functions. So that's potentially 4 spare buttons I've got to map to other bits of functionality in DCS. The buttons in the button box work, so I can use them for something else in game. So all connected up, I can now type on my UFC, laser codes, offset points, using my UFC to enter the digits, my MFDs to press the buttons, and I don't have to reach for the mouse at all. So I've just added an offset from bullseye, 181 to 50, and zooming out on the TAD, I can see that down on the bottom left that point and change the selection, I can see that that's the point that's 181 for 50 from balls. Sweet. So looking at the final position in my sim pit, I'm going to have to get the black paint out now, but I've made a little shelf to mount the box on. And I've also drilled holes through the mounting feet behind it and screwed it down into the shelf so that it doesn't move around while I'm playing. So with DCS BIOS running, if I disarm my ejector seat, my master caution light flashes. It's flashing in DCS and it's flashing on the button box. And if I reset master caution on the button box, it resets in DCS. If I don't want the backlit buttons, a long press on one turns off the lights. The master caution light still works with the backlight on or off, and again a long press turns it back on. But it does send a one signal to DCS, so if I did that during gameplay, I would need to clear the input from a CDU. So overall, if you play DCS and fly the A-10C, this button box is a fantastic addition to any semi-permanent sim pit that you're building for yourself. Obviously, it's not as bespoke as if you'd built your own box out of components, but it's an awful lot less hassle for those of us who aren't quite so technically minded that will sit with a soldering iron and a box of components trying to program Arduinos to do exactly what we want them to. I bought this with my own money. This isn't a sponsored, paid-for review. Having looked at the Buddy Fox unit for quite a long time and seemingly missed my window because they don't seem to be online anymore. For the price point, this button box is fantastic value. This is now mounted in my rig and is going to stay there for the duration, I think. I'll include all the links to the unit itself and to the software that I've installed down below in the description. If you've got any questions you want me to answer, please feel free to comment or reach out to me on Discord. As a wrap up, the only things I'd really recommend to improve this might be to provide the feet with some holes in so that they can be screwed down without modification, and ideally to include some extra mounting options so that it's a bit more flexible for different sim pits. Even if that was so much as a bracket that fit into the same slots that the feet go into, and the bracket could then be screwed or clamped to a desk or to an aluminium profile rig, or like mine, a wooden rig. But overall, no major complaints at all. Just absolute delight with having the ability to type in the UFC without having to reach for the mouse and the keyboard. Thanks for watching. Hope this was useful. Back to DCS gameplay next.